Thank you so much to everyone who's joining us today. We're really excited to bring you this program from our partners at Aprio. We have worked with them for several years now, and when they came to us this year and said, what do you need? What do nonprofits need? Where is there an information gap? And we said, cybersecurity, because we're afraid of it. It's scary stuff. We don't, how do we approach this? And they said, no problem. We know the guy. And so they set us up with Jeff Kramer, who is the EVP of Digital Transformation and Cybersecurity Advisory Services at Aprio. And that's basically a really long title that says this guy knows what he's talking about. So with that, thank you, Jeff, so much for being here. And I will turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I hope everybody can see me okay, see the screen. I'll tell you, first, I'm super excited. I love, the passion and the mission of nonprofits. And I know you're all, challenged with different things on a day-to-day basis. But I think the value statement, the outcomes you're trying to drive for is always such a delight to interact with you. And thanks for the time. So we're going to kind of dive in and talk a little about cybersecurity. So I'll give you a little bit of my background so you know why you're even listening to me. And then I want to give you a couple of things. I want to give you a lay of the land, some insight into how the market exists today. What's the threat? What are you kind of up against? Some pivotal moments that have led us to this place in time. And then I want to give you actionable things that you can evaluate in your organization or in other organizations or people to see how well you're doing in today's current market to protect yourselves, right? So security is a complicated model. There's a lot. I'm not going to go into all the details. I'm going to bring it up to the level so that you can have some real walkaways that you can go evaluate and ask some questions around. If there is an outcome, it's you walk away with some questions that you go ask of your organization or your partner who maybe is helping with your security program. That's it. I want to get the word out there, get the message out there, and raise some education. So as a ground rule, if you got a question, put it up there, right? So the facilitators are going to help me kind of like bubble those up. But I would rather, like, if you have questions as we go through this, that you just ask them. This is your opportunity. I'm here. I know, I've got a lifetime's knowledge of technology and digital in my head, as well as cybersecurity. And, I really want to, help you out and get you some information and answer questions. So there's your shot. So who am I? My background, I started early in my career in the 80s. I've done application development work. I started doing security work for the Marine Corps in the late 80s. So I have a DoD bent to my security background. I like to say I did security before it was cool to do security stuff. In the 90s, I did a lot of carrier work. That was the big .com boom bust cycle. And I was doing global networking and global communications and carrier stuff. Worked in manufacturing for a number of years for some big manufacturers. Have worked in, healthcare, utilities, retail, built a security program for some global corporations like Estee Lauder, done data and insight analytics, machine learning projects for companies like the Home Depot. So just a wide breadth of my technical expertise, and our team is focused on technology as well as cybersecurity. So a really deep set of skills as it relates to technical, but I'm a business owner. I started my first business when I was 18 years old. And I have built companies throughout my life. And that, I think, is what grounds me to why this is important for you as individuals, as leaders and owners and executives and people inside of organizations. And so let's have a conversation around security, but I'm going to bring it back to what it means to your business, because at the end, that's what we're here for. We're here to help kind of raise awareness around that part of the message and not turn you into security experts, right? But how do you protect your business? You work hard to accomplish your mission. And I want to help you not fall backwards because you have a security situation, right? So going to dig in. So a little grounding around technology. So let's kind of like set the stage of what we're talking about when we think about technology. And, we often refer to this these days as the first and second and third and fourth industrial revolution. And we're kind of in number 3 going to number 4. But when we think about technology, we think about this transition and what's happened over the last couple of decades, we really are pivoting around a couple of key points: software, what's happening with the internet, what's happening with compute models, and what's happening with cellular wireless technology, right? The connectivity of that information. And if we just kind of step back to like the first decade that really saw a lot of movement, it was in the 90s. It was the first dot-com boom cycle where we were starting to see some of those companies that today we take for granted, Amazon and eBay, and some of those foundational companies were being created in the 90s. And we were putting up the first e-com sites and creating the first networks. And we moved through there because at the end of the 90s, 2000, we had this bust cycle where everything fell apart. And we got to the other side of that. And we could see the people who are going to be the winners, the ones that survived that first wave of innovation. And it accelerated from 2000 to 2010. And we had PayPal and YouTube and Facebook. Gmail came out from Google. And we had an idea called virtualization that came out. Virtualization led us to the new cloud computing platforms, the AWSs of the world from Amazon. And all of that stuff culminated in 2008. 2008 was really a pivotal point in time where the iPhone came out. And the idea of compute platforms going from your laptop or your desktop to your hand or your wrist or something like that, that was the breakout. That was the moment in time that things really started to come together. And what we found and what still exists today is every time we create some new technology, we can stack it with other technology. We can blend it together, and that gives us more and more capabilities, right? So as 3G turned into 4G, turns into 5G, we can connect more computers. As virtualization moved into the cloud, and we have AWS, and then Microsoft did it, and then Google does it, all of them are them leveraging on top of that virtualization. We had a little period of time, we called it an AI winter. And at the end of the 2000s, we broke out of that. And so AI and machine learning became more and more common as a capability. And we had cloud and cloud compute. And what it means to the technology and what it means to the businesses and what it meant to the world is more and more capabilities were being created because we could stack them and we could plug them together. We could do like a Legos thing. We could take different capabilities and we could build new things and bigger things. And that just kind of continued to accelerate. We had application growth, we had storage growth, we had compute growth, and it just kept going, right? And so for businesses and for people in the industry, that's a very powerful tool, right? So it's an enabler for each and every one of your organizations as you engage with your customers and with your partners and with your markets. That technology is an enabler. But from a security point of view, we have to think about it in 2 ways. First, as you rely more and more on this technology in order to deliver your mission and reach your aspirational goals, it becomes more and more critical for your success, which means if something happens to that technology, your business is directly impacted. Your mission is compromised. And sadly, the other challenge is the technology is an enabler for the hackers as well. All the technology we use, all that great capability that we use as businesses, as we're reaching our constituents, the hackers are using the same technology in order to attack us. It's an enabler for them as well. So it's kind of an interesting thing to appreciate that the technology is driving us, but it's also enabling the hackers. And we see that, and it becomes something that we have to think about. So when we think about hackers and the criminals and the organizations that we have to worry about, they fall into 2 buckets. The first one is financially motivated. These are the criminal organizations that are interested in stealing the stack of credit cards and selling them. They're the organizations that want to monetize the attack. They're solely motivated by a financial means. And for many, many years, that was really done to steal information. And I'll talk in a little bit about how that has changed in the last few years. but they were really motivated to steal some information and then go sell it. And then the other groups that we had to worry about were state sponsored. And most people didn't worry about them. Most people really weren't worried about them because they were more interested in either politics or IP or something like that. So we don't see them appear in the commercial space as much, but they're definitely out there and they are definitely motivated to do things. They just generally weren't motivated necessarily financially. But there's a new playing field that showed up, and it started showing up last year and it definitely showed up this year, where now it's both of them are causing challenges for organizations. What we have seen is the state-sponsored attack, those organizations have also started to bleed into the financially motivated category. And so some of the state-sponsored organizations said, well, we need to raise some money, so let's go into the criminal space and let's leverage that in order to raise some money or disrupt things, right? And it shows up socially on the social platforms. You know, it's clearly part of the dialogue in America and around the world today. And it's really created some new challenges, right? So you think about the criminal organizations, and now you actually have to think about the state-sponsored ones. And we really saw it when the outbreak of the Ukraine conflict started. There was a very active dialogue that very first week when that conflict started, which was, is it going to bleed out of that? Meaning, are people going to pick sides and then attack other countries or other organizations in other countries as part of an extended conflict beyond the battlefield, beyond the physical battlefield, but into cyberspace? Now, luckily, that didn't really happen, but it definitely could happen, or we haven't seen good evidence of it happening at scale. There were some incidents, but we definitely see the trend. And so we have to be thinking about that when we think about what's happening in the world. Now, interestingly for me, as I said, I started in the Marine Corps. I have some background in the military. And when we were thinking about things back then in those days, and I don't do that anymore, but when I was doing it, you know, we were thinking about like a conflict and how quickly can you engage the enemy? How quickly can you reach out and get to them? And depending on what weapon system we're using, what we always understood was there's a range and there's a speed of attack, and how far away they are and how quickly we can engage was a really critical thing, because that helps us understand what our reach is and how much we can have an impact. And we see this today. Artillery is a big part of the conversation, you know, just standing back 26 miles and, you know, lobbing artillery on people and, you know, larger artillery on battleships. And today, the big conversation about the missile attacks, these are all things that everybody can relate to, right? They are all related to speed of an attack. How quickly can it get there and how far can it go? And we are talking about hypersonic missiles now. But when we think about this in the internet, the model has really changed. The reach and the speed of the attack is so fast and so wide that you can reach anybody on the internet within half a second. So this is the real calculation of how fast information travels on the internet. And within a half a second, I could reach anything around the world. I could go rattle everybody's door, everybody's front door, everybody's internet connection within half a second. And what that means to us as businesses, as we rely on all that technology and we connect to the internet more and more and more, we put more devices and more capabilities on the internet, we have to recognize that the criminals can reach out across that internet at any point in time and rattle the door. And it takes them half a second. And so that's really important, right? Because it gives them reach and speed. And that is why we're seeing the attacks continue to go forward and continue to be a challenge for organizations. I'm a German Shepherd fan. I love my German Shepherd. So I have a whole pack of German Shepherds. I love them, right? So this is Leopold. Leopold is he's an American Shepherd. Very unique. He's the guard dog at the house, right? The UPS, FedEx people, they don't get out. They back the truck up and throw the box out the back. They are not getting out of their truck when they come up to my house, right? Just a great dog. But he's very unique. I have two others. I have Bismarck and Rommel, and they're East German Czech. Right. So they're high prey drive. They like to run, you know, they're like, get on the ATV. I want to chew your tire and I want to chase you for a mile. They want to run and chase and herd, and they have a very distinct characteristic about them. And they're totally different than Leopold. And oh, by the way, they're related. They're cousins. And then I have Ruger, who's West German. And he's kind of a blend. He has a very strong scent. He's the one that's running down the road and catch the scent of a deer and make a right-hand turn and go into the woods. But he's very protective like Leopold too. Each and every one of my shepherds, even though they're all German shepherds, they're all unique. They have characteristics based on who they are and what their organizational characteristics are and their specific DNA and where they came from. And so I think about this because we have to also think about the adversary, and the adversaries on the internet. It's not blindly done. We appreciate and understand through counter threat intelligence who the adversaries are. We can tell if they're Chinese or they're Russian or they're African or they're a criminal organization out of Asia. They have characteristics. They're unique. They're all criminal organization or state sponsored, but they have unique characteristics. And so a good security program isn't just loading software and hoping they stop stuff. It's about really understanding your adversary and how they behave and tracking that and being aware of that through counter threat intelligence so that when they do attack or when you do build your controls, you do that with foresight. You know your enemy and you build responses accordingly. So if we look at statistics from 2022, over the last 12 months, this is a layout of how those criminal organizations are behaving. So there's active threat groups, and we are tracking those active threat groups. And 56% of them are state sponsored. But remember, those really aren't impacting us as much. Those are really going after geopolitical or political things or those type of things. Now, if you're into politics or you're doing anything that's around that type of space, you could be a target, right? That's the type of things they would go after. The other 44% of those threat groups are criminal, and they're going after ransomware. And sorry about the one acronym, BEC, which stands for Business Email Compromise. That's that phishing attack. That's the spam email that you get that try to get you to, click on something and give them your credentials or your passwords, or trying to do some social engineering to get you to do the wire transfer. And then there's bots and POS attacks and malware attacks. And then there's an other category, right? So you can see the breakdown of threat groups, and counter threat intelligence has to be tracking this. So whatever your program is, somewhere there's a counter threat intelligence capability who actively knows the different threat groups and the characteristics. And, do they like to run? Do they like to hurt? Are they, what motivates them and what is their behavior patterns is really important. But when we look at the active engagements, the active incidents, you can see quickly that state sponsored is only 7%. And the other 93% are the criminal organizations. So as organizations, as businesses, as individuals, we are concerned about this 93% for the most part. And that's what's causing the challenge. And you can clearly see on this, ransomware is screaming at you as it continues to be the number one issue, far outpacing everything else that businesses have to worry about, right? So ransomware, business email compromise, and then the bots, and then the malware, and then the other. So this is what we need to ask ourselves. So what do we have to do to be successful? How do we stop ransomware? And I would challenge, what's the pivot point? Why is it such a problem? And we can look at the data and we can see in 2018, there was a pivot point. What happened in 2018? Because in 2018, ransomware took off. We had ransomware kind of ongoing as we were going back in time, but it really became a material issue for every organization. And there's a few things happening. The first thing happened 2016 and 2017. I talked earlier about how the criminal organizations are leveraging the same technology we use to go to market in order to enable the hackers to do their jobs. And so in 2017, 2018, they came out with ransomware as a service. Just like you can go to Microsoft and buy email as a service, you can go out there on the dark web and you can buy ransomware as a service. You can literally give them a credit card, hopefully yours, not one you stole, and you can buy services to help you do ransomware attacks. And that came out in 2017 and 2018 is when we started to see the uptick in ransomware attacks. It's very effective. It's working. It's a testament to the power of the technology. The downside is it's affecting everybody now. So if you think about before 2018, if you were building a security program, an advanced security program at that time, It's because you had a lot of personal information. You were a retail location, you had a lot of personal data, you were collecting, home addresses and email addresses and financial information around individuals. And the hackers were trying to break into your network and they were trying to steal that information. But in 2018, as ransomware took off, then all of a sudden everybody's at risk. The hackers figured out, and partially it's the security industry's fault, we got pretty good at blocking them. We were getting better and better at stopping the theft of credit cards and the theft of personal information. And so they said, we need some new revenue. Just like all of us, sometimes we just need to grow and we need to find new opportunities and new ways to get funding. They needed to find new ways to get new revenue, and ransomware was the answer for them. And as soon as they walk through that door and they're in that mindset, then they ask themselves, well, who do I need to attack? And they're like, anybody. Go back to the speed of attack on the internet means I can attack anybody on the internet within half a second. So everybody that's connected to the internet, and they're more and more connected today than ever before, they're the target. They're the organization you can go after. And that's what the hackers did. And that's why we see ransomware just take off in 2018, affecting every business. And the mission and my goal personally is to try to get this message out, because I don't think everybody appreciates the exposure that they have. It's kind of like riding your motorcycle without a helmet. Like, somebody who works in the ER is like going, that's a bad idea. And they're trying to raise awareness and educate people that don't do that. That's a bad idea. And that's kind of where we're at. We're really trying to help people appreciate the risk and the exposure. Now, one of the things that comes out of this process is the idea of like, what do I do to stop this? Or how do I protect myself? There are a lot of things you can do, right? There's a lot of different things you can do, but I'm going to boil it down to the 3 categories you need to think about. And if you do these 3 categories, you are going to materially reduce your risk. So the first one is around email, right? So we talked about phishing, business email compromise. And, those stories are, they're pretty consistent. We'll get somebody that, is phishing, sending an email. They convince somebody to click on a link and then they get your credentials, or they convince you that, hey, I'm trying to get my payment done and we changed banks. And so you need to reroute the payment to here. And so now you're doing wire transfers to the wrong locations. And we'll get those phone calls where they'll call up and say, hey, we just did an unauthorized wire transfer of $250,000. What do I do now? And, as they say, the horse is out of the barn, right? It's going to be difficult to respond to that. And that's not when you want to discover it. So what do you do with this? 2 simple things. Awareness education is one that we continue to stress, continue to educate people. People can never get enough education on how to see the attack and see the phishing. But at the same time, you need to use some tools. So if you're using email from Microsoft or Google or any of the big players, and there's some third parties out there, there's tools that you can deploy that help you filter out that phishing attack email. So you got to blend it with awareness training and some tools. And then the second big category is malware, right? And malware has been around for, decades, literally decades. And the response to that is still the same as it was in the 90s and beyond. Patch your systems, keep your software up to date, test your systems for any vulnerabilities, so you're confirming that your patching process worked, and load antivirus software. Have good antivirus software running on your systems. That's the same answer. If you called me up 20 years ago and said, Jeff, how do I deal with this? I would have gave you the same answer. It's not a different answer. It's just the same answer. We just got to get better with it. Now, I will say the game is a little different now, right? So that answer is right. Malware is patching, vulnerability scanning, and antivirus. But if you go prior to 2018, before ransomware really took off, the attack was what I call barbecue. It was low and slow, meaning they would get into your environment. They would kind of stealthily move around, because what were they trying to do? They were trying to steal information. They wanted to extract the data and then they go sell the data. So it's like an oil well. You drill the well, you get a little oil coming out of it, And then you're like, yeah, just let it go. And then you go drill another well and you get a little oil out of that well and you let it go. Right. And so it was low and slow. There was no rush there. I mean, so what if it took, 6 months to get all the data out? Eventually you'll get it and you'll go sell it. But when ransomware came out, well, the payment and the way they make money changed, didn't it? Ransomware, they don't make any money until they trigger the ransomware attack. And so we moved from barbecue, if you can tell I'm from the South, we moved from barbecue to grilling, hot and fast. They get into your environment, they get around quickly, they load the ransomware because they don't make a dime until they flip the switch and turn the ransomware on, and you actually have to pay the ransom. So they get in, they do their thing really, really fast. The faster, the better. And as soon as they can, they flip that switch. So what we see with a ransomware attack is it starts sometimes on a Sunday afternoon at 4:00, and by 1 a.m. on Monday, your entire environment's encrypted. Right. So there's some differences that are happening here as these attacks have shifted. And it shows up in the patching game. So I think I had somebody yesterday or the day before was asking, the difference between, do you use Mac or do you use Windows or something like that? And I'll pontificate on those questions if you have them. But, the idea that, Microsoft, that we all know in the technology industry, it's Patch Tuesday. It's the first Tuesday of the month when Microsoft releases all their patches. And what happens is, and some people don't appreciate this, but what happens is Patch Tuesday happens. And as soon as the list of vulnerabilities is released by Microsoft, because they tell everybody, hey, here's all the vulnerabilities and here's the patch. What do the hackers do? They scamper as fast as they possibly can to that list. They figure out what the vulnerabilities are, and they quickly work as fast as they possibly can to scan the entire internet for those vulnerabilities before everybody gets around to patching. Like, it's a race. It really is a race. And they get in there really, really fast. And so again, half a second to touch everything on the internet. If there's a vulnerability that's released, within hours, if not minutes, they're finding that vulnerability and trying to exploit it. So it is a race for patching and vulnerability testing and malware. And then the third category is hacking. And that's the one I want to talk about. That's the one, if I leave you with anything, it's help you with this, because over 40% of the incidents that we deal with have this as an element in the attack. 40% of the attacks have some component of hacking. And the argument in the thesis is most organizations do not have any detective controls to see hacking. And so that's where I'm left with this statement that says, can you even see the threat? Can you see in your technology, in your organization, when those hackers are lurking behind the scenes and they're attacking you and they're taking advantage of you? And I need to help you get better at seeing the threat. Because the sad reality is, in most cases today, when people call us, it is too late. It is when the dog is already in your face. It is about to bite your face off. It's too late. You're calling me up because you say, oh, 40 of my computers are encrypted and we can't do business. I can't receive or send products. I can't reach my people. It's too late. The dog is already in your face. So the message that we need to get out there is, how do we get better at seeing this attack earlier, way before it's in your face? Because it's too late then. It's too late. Your house is burned down. So we take a step back and we think about, again, that German Shepherd. And if I look at that German Shepherd, I can tell what's going to happen before it happens. There's indications, there's subtle clues. There's twitching of a tail, there's ears pinned back, there's a little bit more stiffness in their body. Maybe the hackles on their back stand up. There are things that you can see at a distance and go, okay, something's going to happen here. I need to figure out how to respond to this before the dog is in my face. And there's time. So you want to figure out how to give yourself time. You want to figure out, how do you make that happen? And understand that there's a process for an attack. And so what I'm showing you here is something called the MITRE kill chain. It's the series of events that occur for an attacker. And as an industry, security professionals, we normalize against this framework. So we all are talking about the same thing. Otherwise, we kind of talk past each other, right? But this is a series of events. And just think about this, right? Lower left is kind of where the attack starts, right? They're doing some recon, they're rattling doors. I like to say, use that house analogy, right? They're driving down the street, they're looking for one that's got tall bushes and, you know, a big fence and stuff that, you know, hides them better. And then they go rattle some doors and windows and, you know, make sure no spotlights get turned on. They're looking for the soft target. That's the equivalent of scanning the internet. Now, the sad truth is they can scan the whole internet in half a second, where if they had to physically do this, you just can't make it happen, right? You physically can't go that far. But eventually they find the exploit, they get through the door, they get you to click on the phishing email, they find the vulnerability on Sunday afternoon that Microsoft just announced, right? They find the crack in the defenses in your systems, and they're in, and then they move around in the environment. They hide their trail, they get some privileged accounts, and ultimately they put in command and control so they can get a backdoor or turn your systems into a bunch of bots for denial of service attack, or they exfiltrate data, or they have the big impact. They have the ransomware attack. They flip the switch and all your computers get encrypted. That's the chain of events, and it flows through that chain of events. The problem is most people are telling us when the house is already burned down. It's at the end. It's at exfiltration and impact. Then they run over and said, oh my goodness, we've had a security incident. What do we do? Right? The best way to view this, though, is to redefine success. Success should be defined as seeing the attack early when it's just a little whiff of smoke, just an indication of the future. I want to see the tail switching, the ears going back. I want to see an early indication of the attack, so I can do a smoke jumper mentality. You know, drop 2 people on it, put it out, versus waiting for it to be like a 40-mile-an-hour fire front rolling across the interstate. It's too late, right? The house is burned down. We need to get it early, and that's the goal. So the question that you're probably asking, well, how do we do that? Right? That's easy. There's 3 components to doing this. The first component is collecting more data. You need to collect the information from your environment so that you can have a chance of seeing the attack. So collect more data, and then you need to fuel the analysis of that data with advanced machine learning powered by counter threat intelligence. We have to use the technology that we've invented in order to get through all of that data. And that analysis has to be fueled by that counter threat intelligence organization I was talking about, the ability to understand the attacker, their characteristics, their fingerprint of activity, and their techniques that they use. And then because it's grilling these days, hot and fast, I need 24/7 response. I need the ability, regardless of time of day, once I see those alerts, to action them. I can't wait anymore. I can't wait till Monday morning because it'll be too late. Somebody has to be constantly looking at those alerts and putting into motion the response when it's just a little whiff of smoke, just that indication of the attack. And if you do that, then you put it out early. So yeah, you had an incident. It was 2 computers. It was 1 account. It was something like that. It wasn't the entire company that was encrypted. So we had one of our customers is in the warehousing business. They have warehouses all over the world. And you know, they didn't follow the advice, and they got hacked. They got attacked with a ransomware attack. And all the trucks that were picking up or dropping off, guess where they were? They were lined up down the road because they couldn't receive or ship anything. They couldn't tell you what they had. They couldn't tell you what they were supposed to receive, and they couldn't tell you what they were supposed to ship. And their customers were big customers. Think Walmart, Publix, you know, all the big brands, and they couldn't ship products to them. You want to say there was panic in the room? There was definitely panic in the room. It's because they couldn't see the attack. At scale, it makes the newspaper, but we're seeing a lot of small to medium-sized customers that go through the same thing. Doesn't make the newspaper because you're a small organization and CNN doesn't necessarily care, but it's happening and we need to help you stop it. So let's unpack this a little bit. We talk about data collection. And when I think about data collection, you have to think about the idea that For me to see the activities of the hacker, I need to collect a lot of data. I need to know, what processes are running on computers, what commands are being executed, what traffic is happening from computers out to the internet. I need to collect all that data, and I need to collect it from a lot of sources. I need to get it from your endpoints, from the workstations and servers in your environment, from the infrastructure itself. So if you have offices and there's still connectivity there, we need to collect information from there, and any cloud services you're using, because a lot of people today use cloud services. So we need to collect all of that data. The challenge is, as you can see on this graph, these are all the data sources that feed my ability to detect all those attacks on that MITRE attack kill chain. And most people stop at antivirus, right? And it feels like, okay, yeah, you got it all. But the problem is the perspective's wrong. There's a lot of additional information we need. And when I put the full scope of what data we need to collect, you can see antivirus is barely in the middle. Like it's like, yeah, it's nice, but it's order of magnitudes off from what I really need to collect. So the solution that your providers are doing, or whatever you have deployed, if it's not first and foremost collecting data from the endpoints, from the cloud, and from your infrastructure, you already know you're losing, right? So that's your test number one. Am I collecting the data? Now, I create a problem, right? Now I've collected this data, and now I have this enormous amount of data that I have to process through. And we recognize that, right? That's step two, is now what do I do with all this data? And you kind of think of it as a river of information. Think of it as the Nile River flowing past you every second. And there's all of this data flowing through there. And you have to ask questions. I mean, at the end of the day, we're interrogating the data. We're asking questions. Do we see this behavior? Do we see that behavior? Do we see this behavior? Do we see that behavior in real time against that data? And just to give you a perspective, for ransomware, we're asking over 15,000 questions every second of that data. We are constantly interrogating, and there's over 15,000 things that we're evaluating in order to see the attack. Right? See the indication of that activity across that kill chain that something's going wrong. Now, a human can't process that, right? That's just impossible, right? All that data and all that stuff, 15,000 questions. And that's just for ransomware. That doesn't even include some of the other attacks. You have to have machine learning on top of that. And this is the power of a platform today, is take that technology we started this conversation with, leverage that technology against this flow of information with advanced machine learning detectors. Those detectors have to be powered by counter threat intelligence, right? It's not random. They have to know what 15,000 questions to ask, and counter threat intelligence organizations do. They understand, because they search and monitor the internet, they track all the bad guys, all those threat actors, all those characteristics I talked about. They also have information that come from active incident response. So every time we have an incident, we get smarter. Or when we're testing system, like penetration testing or application security testing or something like that, right? So there's research and operational data. All of that comes together, and it feeds into this detection engine. This detection engine, using this machine learning and AI on top of that data, is interrogating it real time as it's flowing past. That river of data is flowing past us, constantly looking at it. So if I bring it together, I say, what's the solution look like? What should be the elements of a successful solution? You can ask this question. You can literally go look at your own organization, or if you have a partner delivering it for you, ask them, what is the counter threat intelligence organization? How is that? Describe that. Does it include a robust team covering the world? Are we collecting data from endpoints to the infrastructure and cloud? You need all of it. You can't just pick one. You have to have all three. And that needs to go into a data lake. And I'll give you some. So right now, we're processing about 330 billion events per day. Like, wrap your head around that. 330 billion events per day. We have over 15 petabytes of data already in the data lake. And I know some people like, what's a petabyte, Jeff? Imagine this. Imagine you take a picture of yourself 4,000 times a day till you die. That's 1 petabyte. Right? That's a tremendous amount of data. And not the little pictures, the big new iPhone 14 pictures, right? The big pictures, that's a petabyte. We already have 15 petabytes of data. And then that's running underneath that detection engine. That detection engine is fueled by counter threat intelligence. It's running against all that data, and it's looking for those indications of compromise. And when it sees that stuff early, It's alerting the 24/7 security operations center, the people who are actively monitoring those alerts so that somebody can react to it quickly, drive a high quality alert, and then also react to it, right? Get it when it's just a little whiff of smoke and not your entire organization's encrypted and locked. This is what success looks like, right? You can take this and go ask, are we collecting data? Do we have a detection engine that's running with machine learning AI that's hooked into counter threat intelligence? And do we have a 24/7 SOC? Now, I've been passionate for my entire career to take the solutions that work in the Fortune 500 and downscale them so they can work for small to medium-sized organizations. That's been the injustice that I've been fighting, because it's not fair that the $12 billion company can have all the right tools and the rest of us are left to just kind of like hope for the best. And that's what we created at Aprio, is this solution downscaled so it fits into small to medium-sized organizations. So it's not hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to do this. It's a couple $100 per endpoint per year. It's a reasonable price. And so you need to go look at your organization. And if you don't have this working, I implore you to have some conversations to try to find a solution that works. If you do have something running, make sure it's checking all the boxes. Don't accept a subpar system, because then that's false security. That's that maintenance program that once you have the accident doesn't cover any of the repairs, right? So that's a lot.
That is a lot. We've got a few questions and comments coming in.
This is the best part of it. I love the questions.
Yes, me too. And I really want to reinforce everyone here as well. We have Jeff. This is someone who obviously clearly knows what they're doing and knows what they're talking about. So bring those questions. Nothing.
Bring me the good ones. I want
yeah.
I want the $25,000 question. Don't give me the $100 ones. I want the ones that are double jeopardy, good money questions.
All right. So, we're looking at this from a nonprofit lens.
Mm-hmm.
Nonprofits are always contending with a couple of challenges: funding and human resources, people, talent, people who know what they're doing in their organization or who are contracted out, and trying to navigate that in addition to then all of these pieces. So can you tell us a little more? And we've got a couple specific questions building up in the chat around this as well, but tell us a little more about scale here. What's the bite-sized part? What's the thing you work to? And what's the goal that you really need to long-term get there?
Yeah, you can't go this alone, right? I think this is where people have really started to learn. You're not going to build this yourself, right? The entry price for a SOC, anybody on the call who's interested in building their own security operations center, $1.5 million a year, just to get the bodies in the seats, right? So you're not going to build this, right? You can't afford to build this. You have to find a good partner who's going to deliver this capability. As a business owner, as a leader, as an executive, as a manager in an organization, you don't want to be this. This is not you. You want to just go consume the outcome, which is, I want to know somebody is collecting this data, analyzing it with the right technology, and reacting to it, and being proactive so we can get these issues when they're small. So I think that the answer ultimately is, the deployment and partnership of this type of solution. And, our experience is, because of the enablement of cloud, we've been able to take these solutions and let people consume them as they need. It's not like you have to go buy 100 licenses. If you only have 25 endpoints, you go get 25 endpoints, right? So the scaling question is linked directly to your technology footprint. And it's really then just a matter of, as you grow, you can kind of keep your cost under control, because you're only going to buy what you need, and it's really against the endpoints. So as you scale up, you would scale up your endpoints and stuff like that. We've taken away a lot of the unknowns around, cloud infrastructures and, events per second. Then none of that matters, right? It really is a matter of just kind of scaling up based on your endpoints and stuff like that.
So I have a couple of follow-ups to that. The first is, let's talk volunteers. So whether you're on site or virtual, you have control of your assets, your computers, your servers, your cloud store, all of that fun stuff. But I think a lot of times what happens with nonprofits is then you've got volunteers who need access to pieces of things in order to do work that helps make your organization run. So what are some ways that we can help mitigate the risk, even though we have to sometimes sort of open our borders, if you will, to people external to our own devices and our own controls?
Yeah, I love that question. I'm glad you asked that. It's the new world we're in, right? I mean, we're not going back to the world of everything is in a nice little box and everything's, conveniently controlled by any organization, profit or nonprofit or government, doesn't matter, right? We're in a world where, there's crowdsourcing and a lot of volunteers and a lot of engagement across these organizations. So you have to kind of think about the underlying risk, right? So there's a little bit of this that is individual risk management within an organization. You're not going to necessarily, because it's a volunteer, you don't want to reach all the way into their assets, right? You don't want to absorb that exposure or that liability that you're protecting their asset. But if you need them to connect to your systems in such a way that there's an exposure that comes from that, the way we're solving that today is we're using what we call virtual desktops. So you create an environment where you have a virtual desktop platform that they work from, and they connect to that. You control that piece. So they connect in. It isolates or virtually firewalls their endpoint away from your systems, and they go into that environment. They do their thing. And when they're done, they go away and that thing just disappears, right? And then when they come back in, you just spin up another little virtual desktop for them and they do their thing again. That's like the ideal model. Now, there's a cost to that and there's some complexity to that, but it is really the right way to go. So if you have enough risk and exposure, then that's a path to go down. The other path is more around leveraging SaaS solutions so that their engagement with your organization is limited to some SaaS systems. And so there's inherently a level of protection that come from those SaaS systems, only if you carefully control access to those systems and still monitor them. So I always provide advice around anything on the internet needs to have two-factor authentication running, right? You have to have the second authentication turned on. The days of just having a password were okay. They weren't great when it was all internal to the organization. But as soon as you plug it into the internet, again, half a second to touch everything, I need to then add some additional controls. And we've advanced the capability of two-factor authentication. So it's very low friction now. But, the idea that you log into an application on the internet and it's not also verifying something you have with a little phone link or something like that, that's just inherently a very dangerous model. So you want to turn your two-factor authentication on. You want your SaaS applications to be the touch point because that's the only exposure, but you still need to monitor those environments, still need to collect some information. Depends on the application on how best to do that and stuff like that. But you can ingest all that cloud data, access data, so you could see, if somebody's trying to brute force an account or something like that. So, it's a really good question. It's a hard one to answer for organizations because, you want the bring your own device model, right? Because you can't afford to go buy laptops for the world. It just doesn't work, right? Financially, you can't make that work. So you have to make that decision. Is there enough risk to virtualize it with the virtual desktop, or can we allow them access to a SaaS program? And really, let's just make sure we're focused on access management and monitoring of that SaaS platform.
Absolutely. And that leads into another thing that just compounds the issue again for nonprofits in terms of the financial implication here. And that's that when you get into two-factor, that's also going to restrict your licensing, right? So it gets harder to share licenses and share logins, which is intentional. That's how you keep yourself safer. But there is a very real practical implication for a lot of nonprofits that practice that. So I think when we talk about, prioritizing solution and prioritizing funding and how important this is, those are things to budget. Those are things to think about. Who needs a license and where are you deploying your different resources? Is it something where you need a staff person? Is it somewhere where you can better leverage volunteers?
So when we look at a program, like, so when I'm engaging with a board of directors or executives or anything, and they're like, I need a strategy on how we're going to deal with cybersecurity, right? And it depends on the size of the organization as to how much you do this, right? But the larger ones, even small but big small ones, need to be thoughtful about this, right? And so at that place and that point in time, it's a risk assessment, right? There is really a risk conversation. And the way you do that is you have to understand the business. You have to really understand how the organization is accomplishing their aspirational goals and how technology is being used to enable that. And then we build off of that in order to consider what controls and architecture need to be in place. And I always like to say the critical outcome of that type of risk strategy and executable strategy that you can run with is, where do I spend my first dollar and where do I spend my last dollar? Just as important, when do you stop spending money because you're having diminishing returns, right? So it's not a one size fits all. So if you're a larger organization or you're growing or you've got a critical mission, I would argue that you should and have to do some investment in that strategy. You want to do it from that point of view, though. You don't want to just go start picking technology and controls, because you could be buying stuff that doesn't really line up with your risks as a business. And that's really what the nuanced conversation, and that's where it comes from. And that's where just good advisor who can help you navigate those decisions, it's really important, right? I mean, just like getting a good financial advisor, if you're making a lot of investments, don't try to do this on your own. There's people like myself and my team who spend their whole day focused on this one topic, and you need to tap that knowledge.
Absolutely. Let's take a step back to the sort of more beginning of the presentation.
Sure.
Rewind in time a bit here. Is there any kind of vulnerability that is greater than another? So let's say you're a small nonprofit, you have one employee and a board of 10 volunteers, versus a mid-size, versus obviously larger nonprofits probably already have some kind of solution in place. So for small and mid-sized groups, if they bring this up to their board and the response is, oh, we're just a mom and pop, or we don't need to worry about that, who is vulnerable? Is there anything trending right now? Is there any kind of cause type or
I wish I could give you an answer that would make everybody sleep better tonight, but I can't. Ransomware is a universal attack. Anybody who's doing anything with computers is the target. Often very opportunistic, meaning they don't care. They didn't wake up and say, I'm going to go after organization 1, 2, or 3. Now, they will sometimes focus on industries. We do see kind of a rolling wave through different industries. I mean, for a period of time, it was gas stations. And after it was gas stations, it was like, flower shops. And then we had a wave of city and county government, right? I mean, we see those trends, but in the end, everybody's at risk. And so I can't say that based on what you're doing, if you're on the internet, you're at risk. And so with that, the size is important, right? The foundation is still the same: awareness training, antivirus, email, patching, vulnerability management, and some type of solution to see this type of attack. Those are foundational. Good password management, two-factor authentication on the internet, right? So those are we call those table stakes. If you're not doing those, then you are basically opting to wait until the dog is in your face. And you're going to call us when it's too late and the damage is already done, right? And I will tell you, my rate is different when your house is on fire than before your house is on fire.
Well, that is a perfect lead into our next question, which is, what is the rate? What is the range of services that Aprio offers, and what are the rates for those? And thank you, Loretta, for that for that question, but especially as it relates to smaller organizations. Is this something that is accessible for them?
It is. So this, ultimately the security monitoring services that we offer, it's in the, couple $100 per endpoint per year. So it's not an unrealistic, unobtainable, and that's including, the technology, the platform, and the 24/7 monitoring. So it's not an unobtainable goal, right? So at the low end, it's a couple of K per year. And then it scales up from there and depends on the size of the organization. And remember, that goes against 40% of the attack surface, right? 40% is hacking, and it really is addressing those issues. Your other pieces, your antivirus, you need a good next gen AV, you're looking, $40 per endpoint for that piece of technology. Patching should be something that a lot of people get, depending on if you're using like Google or AWS or Microsoft Azure, all of them have different solutions to help you with patching. We've gotten much better with that, right? I mean, some of those things have gotten better. So it's not, like I said, it isn't I need $500,000 to make this stuff happen, right? We have a lot of small organizations with 25 people that we're able to kind of get this capability into their hands and really move them forward, right? So I think if you're a little bit more sophisticated or larger, or your mission is critical, and even if you're small, you could solve a critical mission, right? I mean, I have worked with really small hedge fund guys who there wasn't a lot of them, but they were moving, $1 trillion. So you have to weigh what you're trying to do and what your mission is. And that kind of drives that a little bit, but it's not something that's unobtainable. But as you get bigger or your risk goes up, meaning your mission's more critical, you also might want to consider, that the strategy, right? And we scale that as well, right? So we'll do the health check at the low end. We have some, small engagements that we'll do to do like a risk profile strategy. And those things are going from like 5 to 25 to 50, just depends on the size of the organization. And those are engagements to help you drive that strategic plan. So again, scaling it up or down based on the size of the organization and the complexity.
Absolutely. And I want to point out here, endpoint, when we're talking about an endpoint, we're talking about a device, right? So that's phone, laptop, tablet. Yeah.
Yeah. Think about your laptops, your workstations, your servers. That's kind of the endpoint count, right? Sometimes I use that word and I forget to define it well for people. I apologize.
We've got good folks asking good questions. So that'll
keep it going. I love the questions.
I do. Yeah. Well, and to that end, I know that we're at our time. So I do want to acknowledge that for our audience, that is our content today. So if you have to drop, we understand. I do have a few more questions. If you have a few more minutes with us, Jeff.
I do. I'll take some more questions. I have more time. For those, if you have to go, if you hit that QR code, we put up a special site just for this. And it kind of recaps sort of the information I just walked through for you. And we do have a special offer to, have a consultation with us. So, take advantage of that. Hey, somebody comes along and says, would you want to talk to this team and have a more targeted conversation? There's your gate. There's your door. If you just want to recap of the information, go there, man. It's we put it up there just for this group. So we wanted to make sure the information kept flowing as our primary goal. So, yeah. But yeah, excellent. More questions. I love them.
Yes, excellent. All right. Well, thank you. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll back here. Can we talk cybersecurity insurance?
That's a good question, right?
How much do you need? What's relevant? Do you need more if you have less preparedness? Well, how does that work?
So there's a trend that occurred in the industry over the last few years, and it is directly related to the ransomware attack trend. If I rewound the clock 5 years, if you wanted to go get cyber insurance, in most cases, it was like, how much do you want? Here, fill out this one form and you're done. That's not the case anymore. If you try to go get cyber insurance, you are most likely going to be getting 2, maybe 3 additional writer or questionnaires that you're going to have to fill out. And I guarantee those questions are also going to include, do you have endpoint detection and monitoring, the thing that I'm talking about here? Like, are you doing certain things, right? They're more granular, and it's a direct response to the insurance industry, who's been paying a lot of money in ransomware claims and incident response costs. And so they've, tightened up the underwriting process in order to get that insurance. Number two, and often probably the biggest question that people ask is, well, how much do I get? That is a unique answer for any insurance person or any organization. You have to evaluate your exposure is. The idea though that today you can go get, $5 million in, cyber insurance and you're covered. It's not the case anymore. We see a lot of litigation on the backside of those insurance claims. The insurance companies take their army of lawyers and they're like, well, we don't have to pay you because you didn't do X, Y, and Z. Right. So they're much more defensive about making payments. And so you really have to kind of have your program together and protect yourself. And then part of any risk management program for an organization should include, evaluation of what your insurance threshold should be, whether that's your umbrella insurance or your cyber insurance or any insurance. It's a business conversation to have to determine how much insurance you want to carry. There's a cost to it, and there's a coverage amount to it, and it is one arrow in the quiver of a program. It's not the solution, it's part of the solution. It's a great question though. And I wish I could give you a perfect answer, but it's a little nuanced for each organization.
Absolutely. As most things are.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. So as we wrap here, let's, if there's one thing you want everybody on the call to take action on today to make their world and their organization just a little bit safer tomorrow, what is that one thing?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you my takeaway for you. And I said it kind of at the top of the call, I want you to go away and ask some questions. If you're doing it and you think you got it right, go ask your provider, what data are we collecting? Are we getting all of these pieces? What's the counter threat intelligence? How is that running through the detectors? And do I have 24/7 response? If you go through that checklist and you say no to any of those things, I'm telling you, you have a gap in your program that is material, and you're exposing to 40% of those attacks, including that piece of it. So you're taking a big gamble on your program and your organization, because it is not if you get attacked, it's when. And because you're missing those things, that attack is going to potentially burn your house down. And all the good work you've done, all of the careful investment you're making in your mission could get turned upside down over the weekend. And that's a really bad place to be in. And I hate when people show up when that dog is in your face. That's the takeaway, right? I gave you the other basics. You want to do those basics, but I can't stress enough how everybody's exposed, and ignorance is bliss. People sleep well at night if you don't know what's in my head. I'm just trying to help people avoid some of that, because it's not good. It really isn't a good place to be. And I think the definition of success is helping you avoid those things. So when you have a little whiff of smoke, we can put it out. That's the definition of success. Go to the site. I reiterated those points there. I would just challenge you to go ask those questions. And if the answer ends up being no, either get them to do it, figure out why it's gapping or what your gap is there, or pick up the phone and call us or link us, or we're here to help you find a way to do this so you can still be successful, because everybody's got an amazing mission. And it's frustrating for me when I see those missions get turned upside down for something that we could have prevented.
Absolutely. I mean, I think for me, that's also the biggest takeaway, is that this kind of situation can be disruptive, not just to your programming and your services and your ability to work toward your mission and derail that. It can also impact your funding. It can impact, your credibility with your donors and with your audience. So getting ahead of things is really the best solution. So thank you so much, Jeff, for walking us through all of this today. I'll reiterate again, Jeff's info is on the screen. We will share this presentation as well in this recording. So spread that on to whoever it is that in your organization that needs to make those decisions or has those follow-up questions. They're available for those. Likewise, info@gcn.org. We're happy to route questions
and spread the word. If you have other friends or acquaintances, or you're in other groups and people may or may not know what to need to do. Like I'm about education first, because you can't make good decisions if you're uninformed. And as a business owner myself, I know it's stressful sometimes to not know all the answers. So get the word out, let people know, and let's help work together to keep everybody on track so you guys can hit your goals and see your aspirational goals succeed. That's what I want to see happen.